so we're back again. A little bit of minor difficulties, but once again, welcome back to Cullen on Film. On this episode, as you can tell, I'm not Mr. Cullen. I'm one of his students, Yazemin, Yilmaz, and today we are interviewing the one and only Cahlo. How are you doing today?
Hi, how are you? Thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, awesome! I'm doing good. That's great to hear that you're doing good too. So,
Yeah.
tell me. I know you're like a jack of all trades. I mean, you started off like in a band, then you went into like photography, then film. Now you are like, you created a production company and you're doing podcasts. How did this all start? Can you tell me your journey and how, like a brief summary of your journey and how this has led to where you are right now?
Sure. Well, I was born and raised in Staten Island, New York.
Okay.
So my father is an Italian immigrant, and my mother was from Long Island, and was born and raised there. And I always had a deep love of film, and it started when I saw 2001: A Space Odyssey when I was very young, and I always messed around with cameras and kind of learned how to edit on my VCR between like my parents' camcorder and the VCR. And I always was playing with video and things like that. But then music caught my attention. And from the ages of 19 to about 27, I was on tour with bands for most of my life. And I was in a band called The Realistics, most notably. And then I kind of stopped doing music around 35 and didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And I was working in the service industry. I was working in as a caterer. And then one day someone asked me if I took photos, because I was taking photos as a hobby. Once in a while I would make money from it, but not seriously. So I took photos of him and posted them on Facebook. And the next day I was hired like as a photographer, like from there. It was crazy. And then that was a natural progression to want to go into movies. And I made my first film, The Weekend, which did really well. And that was really that was exciting to put out a film, my first film to do that well. And then I made a second film with your teacher, Mr. Cullen, called Death and Disco Fries. And then I made my third short film, Lonely Hearts, which it's going to be streaming through festivals now, and a full-length documentary called In Flowers Through Space. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell. And in between all that, I formed a production company, and I also have a podcast, which it's called the Carry On Picture Show, where I talk to filmmakers and actors and actresses, and we talk about life and creativity and all that kind of stuff, and life in the business. And that is a very condensed 3.5-minute story of my life.
Amazing. Very well done, might I add, especially on the spot too.
Thanks.
Could you briefly describe to me the inspiration like going towards The Weekend, for example? That's your first short film. What inspired you to write that story and create it?
Well, The Weekend was something that had happened to me personally.
Okay.
And it was a moment in my life and an experience in my life that touched me greatly. And I remember the day that I said goodbye to this woman who stayed the weekend with me, and she got on the train. I thought to myself, that would be a great movie. And I didn't have the courage to make a film. And my girlfriend at the time, we're no longer together, but her name is Danielle Goulden. She's the lead in the film, The Weekend. She said, I told her the story. I was like, I had an idea for a movie. And she was like, I told her the synopsis, and she was like, you got to do this. And I said, okay, only if you're the lead. And we kind of took the reins, and she helped me produce it, and we made this film. And I still love that movie. A lot of people hate their first movie, but I love it. It's so special to me because it's a very personal story. It's how I started my relationship with CJ. Mr. Cullen. And it kind of launched where I am now, and got a lot of attention for me as a filmmaker. So I love that movie so much.
I mean, the whole run itself, from what I understand, it had 50 official selections, and then it has won numerous awards. And now it's like you can even watch it on like Amazon Prime and Shorts TV. So like, huge congratulations! Like that is amazing.
Thank you.
So what was it like to experience the after production, like going to the film festivals, making those connections. What was that experience like that the weekend has brought to you?
Great question. That was a whole new world for me. I will say that what was great about it was it felt like I was back on tour again,
Okay.
which I always loved. But this time I didn't have to carry any equipment around, so I was really excited about that. I met so many people in that time period, and I grew really as a person, and I got to meet tons of filmmakers that I kind of saw were getting ignored by the bigger festivals, that I thought were just great filmmakers, you know? And so that started me on the path to where do I help to give these filmmakers a voice, because we almost felt marginalized because we were like, we know our films are good, but they're not being paid attention to. And that started to take me on the path of doing something like the Carry On Picture Show, where I speak to filmmakers that may not necessarily be. I mean, I talk to filmmakers that have been in Sundance and South by Southwest, but I also talk to filmmakers that may not have been, but their films are really good or great and really should have been in those festivals, and to give them a voice. And so that was my experience on the road with the film. It was what I also loved about taking the weekend out was the reaction. You don't know if you've made a good movie until you've screened it for people.
Yeah.
And I chose to make a slow cinema film for my first film. And slow cinema, for anyone who is unfamiliar with it, is one that doesn't utilize a lot of cuts. The pacing is a bit slower than most films. And I just decided to go for it on my first one. I said, well, I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
And instead of cutting, I just held on shots.
Wow.
And it felt right to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't care if anyone got it or not. So I kind of thought, well, people aren't going to like this. But then when I took it on the road, the reaction was so amazing and so good. And the best compliment I ever got was, there's one scene where they're walking to pretty much down this pier. It's the poster of the film too. They're walking down this pier, and I didn't do any coverage. I just shot them from behind because it was my instinct. And the actors were like, aren't you going to do any coverage? I said, nope, I got it. It was a beautiful take, and that's the one I'm going to use. I just did one take of it, and it was perfect. And they really were scared, and they were like, that's okay. And one of the biggest compliments I got was, I'm so glad you didn't cut during that scene and you just stayed behind. And this was coming from a cinematographer. And he said, because it gave the scene so much more meaning. And what that taught me, bringing that film on the road, was trust your instinct as a filmmaker, and never think, well, the audience is going to hate this, because you have to make really hard decisions. Sometimes they may not work. Sometimes they may seem really scary and they may not work, but you have to try, and you have to do, and sometimes you have to fail. But luckily, my instincts were right. So from that moment on, from that question during the Q&A, and that answer, or whatever, that gave me faith as a filmmaker to say, okay, I can do this.
Yeah, because it's all about trial and error, especially like in creatives, and with anything that goes with. So, with what you learned from the weekend, how did you bring that on to the one and only film, Death and Disco Fries? How did you bring that on?
Well, I remember after making the weekend, people thought I was like this depressive auteur, and I was like, no, I have a sense of humor, and I really love comedies, and I specifically love romantic comedies. So I kind of wanted to pull the rug out from people and say, well, I know that you're probably expecting me to do the same thing, but I'm not going to. And I came up with this idea about a guy who dies, and then meets the angel of death, which happens to be his gym teacher. And it all started coming to me like in bits and pieces, and I'm like, this is really funny. and so one day it all came to me, and actually the pivotal moment of the movie, which I don't want to say because I want people to watch it,
Yeah.
but there's a big scene which always gets tears, and I love that because I'm a filmmaker and I'm manipulative and I want people to cry. And that came to me in a moment where I was coming home from Northeast Film Festival, which
Okay.
is Mr. Cullen's friend Larry, and I was listening to my my iTunes or whatever, and the song randomly came up,
Mhm.
and I saw this scene. I didn't know how to end the movie. I didn't know, it's about love and death and regret, and I didn't know what the regret was
Right.
until I listened to this song,
Oh, cool.
and it all came to me, and I went home, and that night I wrote the 10-page script, and that script is what you see on the screen. Yeah, I didn't make any revisions. I was like, this is good.
Wow.
This is good. Let me just do it. But it took so long to get there. It took a while. Like, it wasn't like I just wrote it overnight. It was brewing in my head for a long time. And I think that that's important
Right.
to know, is that if something's brewing and it feels right, and you're like, this really doesn't need a lot of revisions, then good.
That's
Just go
awesome.
for
That's
it.
awesome. So, can you describe that feeling of being able to bring your words to life on a big screen? Because that I think is like amazing.
So yeah, bringing words, really, it's a vision first, right?
Mhm.
So the words are just a vehicle.
Yeah.
I think dialogue is really important, but filmmaking is a visual medium, so
Yeah.
you have to think in terms of shots and then how the words get you there, right? So every time I think of something, I'll think of a funny piece of dialogue, or or I'll get inspired by a piece of art
Mhm.
or a song. It's a lot of it is music for me. A lot of it is listening to music and going, man, I can see a scene now, in
Yeah.
my head. And yeah, I think that the words just kind of come like a fissure, like a faucet. Like, it's just like
Right.
you see it, and then you start to hear it, and then you start to see how the words connect to the imagery, and how
Okay.
you can marry those two things.
Correct. Okay. Cool. That's awesome. So, obviously, the gym teacher that was your angel was Mr. Cullen. So, can you tell me what it was like working with Mr. Cullen on set?
Well, he's extremely demanding. He wanted a cheese plate that was entirely made out of marble. Um, all of the grapes that he requested were supposed to be peeled and plucked,
Wow.
except for one that he wanted floating in a woman's hat in perfume. I
Ama
actually stole that from The Simpsons. Sorry. So no, he's a joy. He's a joy to work with. I've never had more fun making a film than that one, because I was laughing so hard as we were doing the takes, because Mr. Cullen, CJ, as I call him, is he's one of the a rare, like, untapped talent that I think people got to jump on, because he's so good at what he does, and he's so good at embodying the roles that he's given. And and every time people watch that film, they're like, he's a gym teacher. And I'm like, yeah, I know. He's 100% your gym teacher. And it really, I mean, it really worked. And I had a blast. He's a great guy.
That's awesome. That is so awesome. Yeah, it's become an all-time favorite for the TV production class. He's always showing it to us. So, I mean, I think I have like the whole story like ingrained in my brain at this point. But so,
Great.
like, going off of the movies and such, what is like one big inspiration that you take with you anytime you begin a movie project or such? Is there, like you were saying, music really helps you out. Could you explain more on that aspect? Like, when you hear a song, is it right away something comes into mind, like you vision, or is it more of an idea?
That's a great question. I'm starting to make playlists for every film, and give it to the actors to
Mhm.
kind of get into a headspace.
Mhm.
Um, with Lonely Hearts, with my last film, I didn't do that, but I realized how important it would be because I had one for myself,
Mhm.
and it guided me. It
Oh.
kind of guided me rhythmically, and it guided me in terms of tone and theme.
Mm.
Being a musician, music is the guiding force in almost everything, and also when not to use music.
Yeah.
So the weekend has barely any music. There's
Mm.
like one full song. There's two songs, one at the end credits and one at the very middle at the climax of the film. And with Death and Disco Fries, it played a huge part in that. And now in Lonely Hearts, there's a tremendous use of music, which I kind of pulled together. I didn't have a composer. I just kind of pulled together all these songs, and they all fit. It all sounds like a cohesive soundtrack. But in terms of what inspires me as I go into a film, it's just the excitement of making something, and the excitement of like I don't know what's going to happen, and the excitement of being on set, and knowing that things are going to change and that there's going to be challenges and that whatever comes out of this is going to be exciting and fun. And I think that's really what it is for me, and that's why I love doing it. Yeah, and that's really what guides me every day to this medium.
That's awesome. That is awesome. So obviously we're all locked in our own homes, but it's a perfect time to start projects and write. Have you been starting any projects? Have you been writing? Is there any creatives that have been coming out now that we're stuck in the house?
Yeah, no, that's a great question because I actually have I actually haven't been writing as much.
Okay.
I've been thinking a lot about what I want to do next. Uh and I'm working on like I just started working on a web series
Oh,
in
cool.
my head for this stand-up comedian that's here in New York, and we're going back and forth about it. I'm thinking about what I want to do next. I'm thinking about we want to take Lonely Hearts and pitch it to streaming services. So we're working on a show Bible. What I've really been focusing on is my podcast because it's the easiest thing to do right now. And I was like, well, how can I make my podcast better? And what I did was I hooked up two cameras in my little podcast fort that I call it. And now I've been doing a lot of Zoom interviews, but I've started to put them on YouTube, and it's slow going. They're not getting a lot of views right now, but I don't care because it's more of like it was something I wanted to do and
Right.
something that I wanted to challenge myself with and say, okay, I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna expand on this now, so when I come back into the real world, it's even better than it was before.
Cool.
And in terms of projects, I always like to wait and let things marinate. And the thing that I work on is the thing that comes and hits me the hardest, right? So the idea that hits me the hardest and the one that's just flowing and it's like coming out of me, like just pouring out of me, is the one that I go towards.
Okay, cool. That's awesome. So I know you started the Carrie Allen production. Could you tell me, because I know you were explaining briefly about what really got you into helping out with productions. Can you tell me more of what really inspired you to start it and then how you started such the production?
Well, I think that it was a decision that I had to make because having a production company legitimizes you in a way. It also it was for business purposes and boring tax purposes. I wanted it to fall under an LLC, but in a more creative way. I mean, honestly, it was just a business move. I think that you have to have a knowledge of business if you are in this business, in the movie business, and starting a production company, it helped me encompass everything I do. So the podcast falls under it, the movies I make fall under it, the photography I do falls under it, the cinematography I do falls under it, and it's also just like cool as hell to have a production company.
Thanks. So why do you call it Carrie Allen?
That's everyone asks that. So I took I love Cary Grant, right? And I love Woody Allen movies. So I took Cary Grant's first name, Cary, and I took Woody Allen's last name, Allen, and I put them together.
Boom.
And I was like, that's a great name. To me, it sounds like a guy here like this. Cary Allen here. You know what I mean? Like, it feels like that. Like, yeah. Very like, cigar chomping 1930s kind of producer name with his like feet up on the table.
Like
and it just became this thing for me, and I was like, well, that name is going to be part of the podcast, because people call me Cary when they email me at the show. I'm like, no, my name's Dennis. I know it's confusing, but it's the Cary Allen Picture Show. And also, I just love the ring of Cary Allen Picture Show too. But I just loved the ring of that name, and I was like, wow. And it's me paying tribute to two artists that I grew up admiring their work. Not them as people, but their work. and that's how it came about. Yeah.
That's awesome. So you were explaining that your production, your photography and film falls underneath it. What would you say is like the pros and cons of both industries? Because they do have their differentiations.
Well, I think photography for me now has become something that has taken a backseat to all the film work, because my passion really is to make films. I don't know how much longer I'll be doing photography, but I still have clients that hire me regularly, and until I don't need that money, that's when I'll stop doing it entirely, and I can just live off of what I'm making from films, and my film work and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's important that every filmmaker. So before I made my first movie, I spent, I'm going to say like 3 to 4 years as a photographer, right?
Okay.
Maybe 3 years. And every situation you could possibly imagine: low light, high light, this light, that light, challenges, Yeah. And in that short period of time, I did so much work that I got a really deep understanding of how to direct people, especially in headshot shoots. Right. I got an idea for composition. I got an idea for color, for lighting, how to use light, how to manipulate light. And that is what made me a better filmmaker. Okay. I suggest that everyone who wants to direct spends at least 6 months just taking photos and only focusing on that. Okay. 6 months to a year in the least. And in that time, you can write your scripts or whatever, but understand photography. Because if you understand photography, you're going to understand how to talk to a DP. You're going to understand how to frame a shot. You're going to understand lenses. You're going to understand what lenses do, focal lengths, this, that. Without photography, I don't think I'd be a filmmaker at all. So I'll always say I'm a photographer and a filmmaker, because I was a photographer first.
Yeah. Okay, cool. That's awesome. Yeah, that's like the best piece of advice, especially, especially for cinematography. And I know that you're a cinematographer and like you help create for like works for clients and stuff like that. Can you name like a couple of the clients that you've worked with, and like which one was like one of your favorite clients to work with, whether that be for video productions or such?
Sure. So I work with mostly like startups and independent people. I've worked for some bigger names too. There's a couple of them I can't talk about. Things, but I think that one of my favorites is I love doing client work because it's fun, and you make money, and you get a certain amount of freedom as a filmmaker to do it. But I think that my most recent client, who's their name Packed Bags, they make backpacks and shoulder bags and things like that. I've worked for them for like 2 years now, and the last thing that I did for them was animation, animation, but through photography, right?
Yep.
And that was one of the most fun things to shoot. And I will say this about client work: as unsexy as it sounds sometimes, like, oh, they do client work or whatever, you learn something every day as a filmmaker doing that kind of work. You also learn how to talk to people who are paying you, and how to get your creative vision across with compromise, because there's a lot of compromise that's involved. But yeah, that's I'm trying to think who else I've worked with. They're all like, I don't know, it's like nothing. I don't think it's anything anyone, it's nothing big, there's no like big names.
Right.
I mean, my photos have appeared in the New York Times. What
Yeah.
else?
I know. I was saying like your work has like appeared in New York Times and then Quest magazine, and then you've
Oh
worked.
yeah.
Yeah, which is like freaking amazing. Like that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, that was pretty
then,
cool. That was the Quest magazine was actually like out of nowhere. I was like, whoa, that and I one of my first clients who's, I can talk about Alan Flusser. One of my first clients who was Alan Flusser, who was a menswear designer. He's a legend. He did the wardrobe for the original Wall Street movie. I interviewed him on my podcast. You can listen to that on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, folks. And I had shot something for him, and it was in, and he was like, "Hey, congratulations!" And he threw this magazine down, and I opened it up, and I was like, "Whoa!" And that is really cool when you see something that you've done in print. It's pretty good feeling. It's like, wow, because online, of course, that's the future, and print is dying. But when you actually see your photograph in a magazine, you feel like you've really made it. You feel like you've really done it.
Wow.
So yeah.
That'd be like an insane feeling. So.
Oh, it's great. It's almost as good as seeing your film, on screen, on a big screen in a theater for the first time. Yeah.
So you were giving advice before, especially for those who are going to filmmaking, to pursue, like, at least learn a bit about photography. Is there any other advice that you would give either to the youth of the creatives or just anyone who's starting to try to get into the industry, trying to make that move into the industry? Would there be any advice you give?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a few things. I mean, one, you have to be willing to fail. If you're going to get into this industry, you have to be willing to fail. And you have to understand that nothing you do is ever going to be perfect. In fact, you're going to make so many mistakes, but that's not a reason to give up. That's a reason to keep going, because you're going to learn from all of those mistakes, and you're going to get better and better and better every time. Watch movies. Watch movies. I'm one of those people. I didn't go to film school. I think that you can only learn so much in film school, and I think that you have to watch films. And I'm not talking about like modern films. The Criterion Collection is a treasure trove of film history. It's like streaming. Like, you guys have it the best. When I was a kid, we had to go to weird movie theaters and pray that like something was playing. There was no way. Like, you had to go to like weird art house film like movies theaters. I still go to those theaters. I love them. And that's nothing too. Go see movies in the theater. Like, actually go, if we're ever allowed in theaters again.
Yeah.
Go see movies in an art house. Go see how it's projected. Go look. Don't just like look at your screen. Like, look. Go experience a film in real life with people.
Yeah.
Because it's truly a religious experience. Like, it for anyone who loves film the way that I do, or the way you do, that's how you're going to get better, because you're going to notice things, you're going to see things, and sometimes you see mistakes, and you're like, oh my God, they're human too. Yeah. And then just be how you are on set is how you're going to be perceived for the rest of your life. I think that there's this misinterpretation that you have to be a jerk or really forceful or angry. Like, I know Peter Berg is one of those directors that's like hailed as being quite difficult. I don't think you have to be that way, but you also can't be a pushover. So how I like to just, I heard someone describe it as be an open-minded control freak.
Okay, cool.
And that is exactly how I am. I'm super open-minded, but if it's not my vision, you gotta leave. You're not here. If you're not with me, you're against me. So don't be afraid to have a vision, and don't be apologetic for it. And when you step on set, you're the director.
Okay.
Let people come to you and have an answer. And if you don't have an answer, have a team that's willing to help you find that answer.
Okay, cool. All right, so to wrap this up real quick, would you be able to just let everyone know where they can see your work, whether that be the podcast, your films, or your photography?
So on my website, DennisCahlo.com, you can find all my information, my photography, my films, trailers from my films. My first film, The Weekend, is on Amazon Prime and Shorts TV. My second film, Death and Disco Fries, is on YouTube and Vimeo. And that's, if you just type in Death and Disco Fries in either of those things, it'll come up. My podcast is available. My podcast, The Carry On Picture Show, is available all across audio platforms.
Cool.
And now on YouTube. So if you go to youtube.com/dcahlo, there's a playlist called The Carry On Picture Show. And I'm about like almost 90 episodes in, but I just started putting up like video episodes. So that's a new thing.
Right.
And yeah, I'm Dennis Cahlo on everything, on Instagram, on Twitter, everywhere. So if you want to seek me out, that's where I am. And I love to hear from people. So, you know, they can email me at dennis@denniscahlo.com or thecarryonpictureshow@gmail.com. And, you know, that's where I'm at.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much. It was an honor being able to interview you. You've been awesome and very good at on-the-spot questions. So thank you.
I'm honored. I'm honored to be here. I'm very grateful, and I'm really grateful that you guys watch my movies, and it means a lot. It means a lot that you guys are getting something and learning something from it. So,
of course. Well, thank you so much again, and I hope you stay safe and healthy during these very unprecedented times.
Crazy times.
Literally, I just, it's like, wow, very crazy stuff. Each month, it's like a new level of chaos, but we'll see what happens.
How are you dealing with this? You know, and how old are you?
I'm going into college, so it's been really interesting.
Yeah, how has this been? Like, how has this been for you? What's your experience like?
High school has been cut short. We're gonna have a virtual graduation. And college, I don't know if my first semester is gonna be online, so it's like it's all like a process. Just wing it and hope for the best. You know, it's one of those things. But I feel it's a quarantine, honestly, now that like I'm looking at a more positive view, there has been so much good that came out of it. I've made a quote unquote Zoom family. I met this family through accidentally they texted me accidentally on a group chat. And I just went with it. They invited me on a Zoom call and we just had a Zoom call. So it was great. So that is what the quarantine does. That's the best of quarantine. Just got to bring people together. So yeah, it's fun time.
I'm glad humanity is present, you know?
Yeah. We're lucky that we live in a time of advanced technology, and hopefully things will get better soon and we'll come to some normalcy at least. But I think at the end of the day, it'll bring people together, especially.
I agree. Well, I'm glad that you have that worldview, because I feel the same way.
Awesome. Alrighty then. So I think now, if I'm correct, I will have my next person coming in. So
okay.
Once again, thank you again. And
thank you.
Speak to you again soon, anytime.
Yes.
I mean, with Cullen, we'll probably speak again.
Have a great day. Thank you for having me on.
All right. Bye.